You know, considering the fact that Josh Scorcher tackled this topic a while ago, I'm surprised more people haven't done it. But yeah, today I'm here to talk about the top 10 craziest characters in video games. The rules here are very simple, one per franchise and only games I've played. Dang, that was actually a pretty short introduction. That's not something I'm used to doing. Self-deprecating humor aside, let's begin. You know, in the world of Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, I think it would be safe to say that most of the characters are at least a little bit crazy. But I gotta say, Inspector Cabenella really takes the cake for at least being the most memorable for being crazy. Now, Inspector Cabenella's actions throughout the game aren't really crazy. In fact, he's a reasonably smart person. But his mannerisms are nothing short of strange. He talks in a bit of a singing tone, he practically dances everywhere he goes, and between his necklace and his big white coat, he's dressed more like he's going to the disco than solving a crime. But he's lower on the list because his actions are that of a pretty rational person. He just acts weird and goofy in the way that he does them. So you beat Kid Icarus Uprising and you're real happy and you watch the credits roll and oh come on, you already know how the story ends. Hades tears through the credits and reveals that he's the real villain of the game. I know that might come as a shock to some, but I think most people who have been on the internet for at least a little bit about Kid Icarus Uprising already know about this. Now, I think there's a reason that everyone talks about Hades. He's awesome, but more specifically, he's a massive troll. But yeah, I think it's hard to argue against the fact that this guy's pretty crazy too. I mean, he has a conversation with Pit where he tries to justify eating souls, and surprisingly does a pretty good job at it. Most of the evil stuff he does throughout the game is mainly just because he feels like it. I mean, he even sabotages Pit in the Aran story arc. You know, the one where him and Pit are on the same side? I mean, for God's sakes, this guy treats being cut in half like it's just some minor everyday thing. And of course, who could forget his famous quote about what he'd do with the wish seed? I'm not going to play it here, but you could look it up if you're curious. But yeah, I don't think I have to say anything more. Hades is a guy whose pretty much only goal in life is to mess with people. The Rabbids. Oh boy, what can be said about the Rabbids? Ever since their first game on the Wii, the Rabbids have been doing all sorts of crazy minigame collections and sometimes other types of games. They've done all types of crazy things. Throughout their games, they've kidnapped Rayman, caused chaos on a global scale, taken over all of TV, stolen countless things, and even destroyed history. And all throughout it, they've done it joyfully, laughing all the way, and making games out of everything, even when it seems completely random. But personally, I think the craziest part about these guys is the fact that they have no real reason for all the chaos that they're causing. Aside from Rabbids Go Home, they really never have a clear motive for what they're doing other than, why not? Either that or it's a complete accident. I'm sure that works too. Has anyone here played MechaNika? No? Just me? It's a pretty good and pretty funny, albeit short, point-and-click adventure on Steam. The game stars Nika, a 7-year-old girl who wants to create a giant robot to rid the world of all the things that she doesn't like. Now with a premise like that, you'd think she'd be on the list, right? Well no, cause really, Nika's best friend Agatha seems even crazier than she is. Apologies in advance for the lack of interesting footage in this one, because Agatha really only appears at 2 points in the entire game. Agatha is a character who's truly faced with a dilemma. She loves animals, she loves eating meat, and her parents run a butcher shop. But instead of having to give one of those things up, she came up with her own solution, creating a religion. In Agatha's religion of carnivorism, it states that meat products are delicious and that the animals are both happiest and safest when they're in her stomach. Now I know what you're thinking, well that's insane, why isn't she higher on the list? Well the thing is, it's not like Agatha's actually crazy enough to believe in carnivorism. She just made it up so she doesn't feel bad about killing animals, and so the animals happily go into the meat grinder. But the fact that she created her own religion just to solve this problem is enough to put her on the list. All I can say is, I'm looking forward to the spin-off coming out where Agatha's the main character. Well, we're already a couple entries in. I say it's time we get to our first murderer on the list. And the winner is Johnny Gat from the Saints Row games. Now, the reason he's low on the list is because I've only played Saints Row 3 and 4, so I don't know a ton about him, but I'd say I've seen enough to warrant putting him on the list. Johnny Gat is quite possibly the most violent member of the 3rd Street Saints, with the exception of maybe the boss himself. Outside of battle, Johnny seems like a calm and reasonably friendly person to hang around with. But if you ever try to mess with the Saints, he will kill you in a heartbeat. This guy is sort of a Chuck Norris reputation in the world of Saints Row. But even that's not doing him justice. I'd imagine Chuck Norris would easily lose in a fight against Johnny Gat. Probably the biggest proof of this is when it comes to Zinyak. Zinyak abducted Johnny about 5 years before his invasion of Earth because he was worried that Johnny could single-handedly stop him. And when you manage to break Johnny free from his nightmare simulation, it's the one time in the game where Zinyak is actually panicked. And Johnny's loyalty mission is just him and the protagonist going on a game show where the goal is to kill as many people as possible. And the dialogue in this mission really is just two best friends catching up after not having seen each other in a while. Unlike some of the other murderers on this list, we actually do have a bit of an idea of how many people Johnny's killed. Towards the beginning of Saints Row 2, it's stated that Johnny Gat has 387 counts of first-degree murder, and that's not counting all the stuff that happened afterwards, or the stuff that the Stillwater government doesn't know about. With all these kills under his belt, I think it's pretty safe to say that Johnny's crazy, but it's also led to him being a very popular character. I mean, after he was supposedly killed in Saints Row 3, the devs brought him back in the next game, and then released a standalone DLC where he was the main character. You know, when I was making this list, I was debating between whether I should put GLaDOS or Cave Johnson on here. In the end, I went with GLaDOS, mainly due to the fact that she's been in the series longer. With GLaDOS, there really isn't a whole lot to say that hasn't already been said. She's a giant robot who runs Aperture Science and killed most of the employees, and the remaining few she has go through a bunch of tests. In the first game, you could argue that she was mostly just a bunch of scatterbrained artificial intelligence, but in the second game, she has more of a personality. A clear, passive-aggressive, sarcastic personality. And it's also stated that before she became corrupted, GLaDOS was supposed to be artificial intelligence based off of Cave Johnson's secretary, Carolyn. I still think that one of the most interesting moments from her is right before the final battle where she starts freaking out because she realized that she has a conscience. And at the end of the game, she still insults you even after realizing that you're the best friend she ever had. There is one thing I can't help but wonder though. Carolyn seemed pretty level-headed in the recorded messages from her in Old Aperture. So if basing the AI off of her caused GLaDOS to go this crazy, imagine what would happen if they based it off of Cave Johnson. I don't know, just food for thought really. I know it seems kind of harsh putting Isaac on a list like this, as he's a character you really feel bad for due to all the nightmares he has to go through. But yeah, that's kind of the reason why he's on this list in the first place. Isaac really does have a hard life. It's implied that some of his family's gone missing, but probably the worst thing for Isaac is the fact that he lives in a pretty harshly religious and probably unloving family, which leads to a lot of negative things like him feeling like his mom's going to kill him, Isaac viewing himself as a demon, and probably a bunch of other messed up stuff that's implied throughout the game. All this emotional baggage really isn't Isaac's fault, but he probably should have it sorted out in therapy or something. Oh wait, that's right, he's dead. Well, that's depressing. I don't really have a clever transition here, just on to the next entry. You know, with the exception of the Knight, you could really make an argument for any of the 7 main characters of the cave being crazy. But personally, I would have to go with the twins for this one. Now, what puts them on the list as opposed to all the other characters? Well, they are 2 little kids who kill their parents, but there is something that made me put them on here above the other characters. With the other characters in the game who have done horrible things, they had some big event that made them snap and go crazy and do the horrible thing that they did. Or heck, not even them snapping, just some reason for them to do the horrible thing that they do. With the twins, on the other hand, there's no real reason for it. I mean, the cave himself mentions them not having to do chores or listen to their parents anymore, but it's not some big motivation like with all the other characters. I don't really have much more to say, these 2 are just creepy. Hey look, it's Flowey. Oh come on, any of you who have played Undertale knew Flowey had to be on the list at some point. I mean, between his creepy facial expressions and his kill or be killed attitude, he had to be on the list. I mean, with the exception of Chara, who you only ever see on the genocide route anyway, Flowey's really the only evil character in Undertale. Basically, after a near-death experience, Azrael Dreamer was turned into Flowey. In the pacifist route, they try to make it seem like Flowey's kill or be killed mentality came from the brutal way in which Azrael was killed. But in the genocide run, which by the way I've never played, it stated that Flowey went crazy from having to go through the same events over and over again and got sick of the happy endings, so he decided to kill everyone instead. Psst. It's a metaphor for the player if they've actually got to this point. But whichever explanation you go with, Flowey's still a bloodthirsty, mass-murdering maniac. I mean, with the other enemies in the game, they all kind of have a reason to kill you, and none of them are really evil. With Flowey, on the other hand, I'm not so sure. That's all I have to say, really. Although, since this is Undertale, I can imagine there's going to be a bunch of fans coming in to correct me on some minor thing that I missed. Hey, remember this guy? Yes, as much as I've hammered in the point on this channel that I don't like The World Ends With You, I still really do like Minimimoto. And come on, this guy's the perfect candidate for this list. So the one thing to know about this guy is that he's obsessed with math. This guy constantly throws out math terms in everyday conversation and builds piles of trash in the middle of the street in order to admire their beauty. And surprisingly enough, this guy knows what he's doing. He has an attack that's just a random collection of numbers that essentially blows him up, but he comes back later even more powerful. And this guy is so unpredictable that his bosses are scared of him. Can't say I blame him, as later on it is revealed that he has a plan to overthrow the guy in charge. Now, I'm not saying Minimimoto's a ripoff or anything, but a villain with a funny speech pattern who surprisingly knows what they're doing and tries to overthrow their boss, I can't help but feel like I've heard that before. Oh yeah, you know where I'm going with this. Come on, you knew he had to be on the list at some point. Although to be fair, despite him being in my username, I really don't tend to talk about Fawful all that much. I mean, for God's sakes, he wasn't even in top 10 favorite video game villains. But yeah, I think it's about time I give Fawful the spotlight that he deserves. If there's any Mario character who's gotten famous for being funny, it's gotta be Fawful. He has quite possibly the most hilariously unusual speech pattern out of any video game character I've ever seen. Just about everyone who's played the Mario and Luigi games remembers this guy's quotes. Well, some of them at least. I mean, this guy just has so many memorable lines. It seems like this guy just loves to make himself the center of attention just to boost his own ego. I mean, why else would he turn Bowser's military base into Fawful Theater? Always doing what he can to put on a show when he meets his enemies and taunting you all the way. No matter what position this guy's in, he's always smiling like a madman, even when he's pretty much been defeated. Kinda reminds you of someone else. And for the record, no, Joker's not on the list. Sure, I've played the first two Arkham games, but I still think it's pretty hard to argue that Joker is a video game character. But anyway, back to Fawful. He's awesome and he's on the list, but you probably guessed that already before you even saw this entry, cause of the number transition. I just had to pick a character from TF2 for this list. I mean, half of them are complete maniacs. But in the end, I decided to go with the Pyro. He's a guy whose face we never truly see, has a maniacal laugh, and burns everything in sight. But the thing that puts Pyro above some of the other maniacs on this list is his Meet the video. In said Meet the video, it's revealed that Pyro has been completely unaware of all the horrible things he's been doing this entire time. Whether it be because Pyro has a mental condition or he's deliberately deluding himself from all the violence that he's caused, either way, it's pretty clear that he's crazy. And considering the competition that this guy had for getting on the list, that's saying a lot. The world of No More Heroes is practically filled to the brim with maniacs. I mean, I think it's safe to say that just about anybody who signs up for the UAA is at least a little bit insane. For me, it really came down between Bad Girl and Destroyman, and in the end, I decided to go with Destroyman. Don't get me wrong, Bad Girl's still a complete maniac. In fact, at one point I was considering having her tied with Destroyman for this list. I mean, for God's sake, she lives under a baseball stadium, bats gimps around all day, and presumably lives off a diet of nothing but beer. But we don't really know much about her outside of that. Besides, her whole lament about how killing doesn't really give her any satisfaction anymore is something that half the characters in the series have done. With Destroyman, on the other hand, the moment I saw him in the game, I knew he had to be on the list. I mean, when he's talking about the complaints with the shaking camera, it seems like he's going to snap at any moment. And right before the fight, he seems to go back and forth between personalities like it's nobody's business. It could just be a ruse to throw off Travis, or he could legitimately have MPD. Although considering No More Heroes 2, where there's two of him, one with each personality, it makes the second explanation seem a lot more likely. Oh yeah, that's right, I forgot to mention, this guy managed to survive getting cut in half. Now that I think about it, that's actually a pretty interesting similarity that these two have. Not that they both survived their deaths or anything, but that both of them feigned weakness in order to try to catch Travis off guard. Oh yeah, and Destroyman's also crazy because he joined a League of Assassins and dresses up like a superhero to kill people. But that part I thought was kind of obvious. Like I said earlier in the video, Josh Scorcher did this topic a while ago, and while I do think his list was pretty good for the time, if there's one thing I really disagreed with him on, it was his placement of Aran Ryan. He's entitled to his opinion and all, but I personally feel that Aran Ryan deserved to be a lot higher on the list. So yeah, Aran Ryan's number 2 on my list. I mean, just how quickly and shakily this guy moves around is crazy. I mean, for God's sake, he's the only boxer in the game who you have to punch before he can punch you in order for you to win. I mean, heck, some of his moves are even against the rules of boxing. And in your second fight with this guy, he actually brings a weapon into the ring. I mean, sure, it's not a gun or anything, but this is just boxing. It's not like he's trying to kill you. Besides, this guy has no problems with throwing the referee out of his way, picking fights with the audience, and ignoring the basic rules of how the lineups at the beginning are supposed to work. And this guy even pulls this kind of crap at his own gym. Also, I love this guy's victory animations. They're so good that half the time I don't even care that I lost. Now, some people say that they wish Aran Ryan had a bit of a goofier appearance, and while I understand that, I don't agree with it. Personally, I think his appearance works in his favor. I mean, really think about it. In the world of Punch-Out, with all the boxers with the huge, exaggerated appearances, it really is a good twist of irony when the guy who looks the most normal turns out to be the craziest of all. You know, we've tackled all manner of killers, crazies, and weirdos on this list today. But the thing is with all of them, while you can clearly tell they're crazy by their actions, you never really get a look inside their head. Well, you know, except for Isaac. Point is, we can tell they're crazy through their actions and such, but we never really get an extensive look inside those twisted little heads of theirs. As you can imagine by all this buildup I'm doing, number 1 is an exception to that. That exception is Boyd Cooper. The moment I came up with this list, I knew instantly that Boyd had to be number 1. I debated this with myself, but Boyd ended up coming out on top. And why shouldn't he be number 1? Not only is he crazy, but we get a big, in-depth look at his mind. When you first meet Boyd, he comes off as a paranoid conspiracy theorist in search of someone called the Milkman. As for his actual backstory found through the memory reels, Boyd used to be a security guard at a place, but after getting fired, he set the building on fire, and was sent to an insane asylum, presumably Thorny Towers. But once Oleander started up his plan to take over the world, he found Boyd and hypnotized him using milk and had him guard the outside of Thorny Towers. Inside Boyd's mind though, it's a twisted version of suburbia. It's a twisted place where just about everyone and everything is watching you. Out of all the minds in Psychonauts, this one is the toughest to decipher what everything means, but I think I've got it figured out. The Milkman is Boyd's true self, who was locked away by Oleander. I mean, they're both arsonists, and it would make sense why Boyd would be looking for his true self. The Rainbow Squirts and the Den Mother are the remaining agents of Oleander's mind control. Why would they want to keep Boyd's true self locked up? Because he's supposed to be hypnotized. The zombie-looking detectives, on the other hand, are Boyd's mind's natural defense mechanisms, as you can see them teaming up with the censors later on. Since it's their purpose to do so, they're also looking for the milkman because they want to uncover Boyd's true self. However, they have to keep it on the down low, either to hide from Oleander's mind control, or because Boyd's so crazy to begin with. And it shows how Boyd's crazy when his true self starts throwing Molotov milk bottles at the censors who are supposed to be helping him. And after you're done poking around in his mind, for the rest of the game you just see Boyd standing there, ready to burn down the asylum. That is, of course, until Fred Bonaparte gives Boyd the okay to burn the place down. When he does, all these characters disappear from him, almost as if they're not needed anymore, and that burning down the asylum was therapeutic to Boyd, and it was what he needed to become normal. If you feel like an idiot for not figuring this out on your own, don't. I first played Psychonauts over 3 years ago, and just now I'm putting all the pieces together. I'm Fawfulizer, and while you may not agree with me on what my conclusion of the Milkman conspiracy means, I think we can agree on one thing. Boyd is pretty crazy.